Customers flooded in, drawn by the irresistible aroma of her meals. Some claimed they tasted magic in every bite, but only Chi-Chi knew the truth. The ancient clay pot in her kitchen was responsible for her success. It had been a gift from her late grandmother, who had whispered warnings before passing. "It will give, but it will also take," she had said, her frail hands clutching Chi-Chi's tightly. At first, Chi-Chi thought it was just an old family heirloom, but when customers who ate from her buka started falling into misfortune while her own life flourished, she began to suspect something sinister. She noticed patterns. Young men who once spoke of bright futures suddenly dropped out of school. Ambitious women who once dreamed of careers found themselves trapped in hardship. As she counted the day's earnings, the pot sat silently in the corner, its dark surface glistening under the dim light. It was almost time for another sacrifice, and Chi-Chi could already feel the weight of her growing guilt. She wanted to ignore it, but deep inside, she knew that whatever power was behind her success came at a cost too heavy to bear. The day before each new moon, the pot would start to change. Its once ordinary brown clay exterior would darken, as if absorbing the night's shadows. A strange energy would pulse from it, and Chi-Chi would feel it in her bones, a silent demand for more. She had tried to resist before, had gone a month without letting the pot feed, but her business suffered immediately. Customers complained of bland food, ingredients spoiled overnight, and a deep emptiness settled in her chest. Chi-Chi's meals had an addictive quality, especially for the young. Students, apprentices, and even fresh graduates flocked to her buka daily. She watched them with careful eyes, knowing their fate was sealed the moment they took the first bite. Some would later lose job opportunities, some would find their dreams slipping away, while others would experience a strange shift in luck. Bad for them, good for her. Her shop grew bigger, her accounts fatter, and her reputation soared. Yet at night she dreamt of voices, pleading, accusing, crying. She woke up drenched in sweat, but every morning she returned to the pot, stirring her fortunes into the next meal. She had convinced herself it was just business until the day she met a man who changed everything. One evening, as she was closing her shop, she saw a group of young men sitting on a sidewalk nearby, speaking in hushed voices. They were her former customers, men who once had promising futures, but now seemed lost and broken. A wave of unease washed over her. Could she really continue knowing she was the cause of their misfortunes? She tried to push the thought aside, but that night, as she stared at the ceiling, she could hear the whispers again. This time they weren't just in her dreams. The pot pulsed with energy, almost as if laughing at her doubts. Chi-Chi first noticed him one Tuesday afternoon. Unlike the other customers who devoured her meals hungrily, he sat at the corner of the buka, observing. He was tall with an air of quiet confidence, and his deep brown eyes held something unusual knowledge. When he finally ordered food, he took slow, deliberate bites, as though tasting more than just the seasoning. "You have a gift," he finally said, locking eyes with Chi-Chi. She forced a smile, but her heart pounded. "Your food. It's powerful." His words sent chills down her spine. No one had ever spoken like that before. Who was this man, and what did he know? For the next few days he returned, never ordering much, but always watching. The customers around him seemed oblivious to his presence, but Chi-Chi felt his gaze pierce through her. Was he here to expose her secret, or was there something more sinister at play? Late one evening, as she locked up the shop, he was still there. "The pot doesn't belong to you," he said softly, making her freeze. "You think you control it, but soon it will demand more than you're willing to give." That night, Chi-Chi dreamt of her grandmother again. This time, the old woman stood before a blazing fire, her face shrouded in smoke. "It is watching you," she warned. "He is watching you too. The pot chooses its master, but it can also choose its downfall." Chi-Chi woke up gasping. The stranger's words echoed in her mind. What did he mean by powerful? Could he truly see beyond the ordinary, or was she just being paranoid? She needed answers, and she needed them fast. But the more she sought them, the darker the truth became. She went into the kitchen and stared at the pot. It looked ordinary, but she knew it was anything but. How many dreams had it devoured? How many destinies had it altered? And yet, she was still holding on to it, still feeding it, afraid of what would happen if she stopped. Every month the pot demanded a sacrifice, one she had never fully understood until now. It didn't take lives, but it stole something just as precious: destinies. The more young people ate from her buka, the more she flourished while they struggled. Chi-Chi had convinced herself that it was just coincidence, but deep down, she knew better. As she watched a former regular customer, a once promising university graduate, wander past her shop in ragged clothes, she felt a cold dread creep into her bones. Could she truly continue living this way? Or was it too late to turn back? The pot glowed faintly in the dim light, as if sensing her hesitation. Chi-Chi clenched her fists. The time for ignorance was over. She needed to uncover the full truth about the pot and the price she was paying for her success. But to do that, she had to confront her past and the dark legacy that had been passed down to her. A knock at her door startled her. She turned, heart pounding. It was him, the stranger. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm, "before the pot decides for you." Chi-Chi hesitated before opening the door. The stranger's presence unnerved her, but something in his voice made her realize she needed to listen. She unlatched the door, and he stepped inside, his eyes immediately scanning the small kitchen where the pot sat, motionless yet brimming with unseen power. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "That pot doesn't just take, it consumes. The more you use it, the more it will demand." Chi-Chi folded her arms, feigning indifference. "Who are you? What do you know about my pot?" He sighed. "My name is Kelechi. My family once owned a pot just like this. It destroyed us." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It grants wealth and success, but only by stealing the destinies of those who partake of the food. It doesn't stop, Chi-Chi. It only grows hungrier." Chi-Chi felt her chest tighten. She had known deep down that the pot wasn't just a lucky charm, but hearing it spoken aloud made the reality unbearable. She wanted to deny it, but her conscience had been whispering the truth to her for months. Kelechi's voice softened. "You have a choice. You can break the cycle, but you have to be strong enough to resist its pull." Chi-Chi exhaled, staring at the pot. "And if I don't?" Kelechi's expression darkened. "Then one day, it won't just take from others. It will take from you." Chi-Chi lay awake that night, Kelechi's words circling her mind. Could she stop? Would the pot let her? She tried to convince herself that her success was worth the cost, but the memories of the young men and women who had lost everything gnawed at her conscience. The next morning, she decided to test it. She prepared a meal without using the pot. For the first time in months, she cooked the way she used to. No whispers guiding her hand, no eerie glow emanating from the clay. The food smelled good, but not as intoxicatingly delicious as before. When customers arrived, she served them hesitantly. Many took a few bites and frowned. "Did you change your recipe?" one of them asked. Another pushed his plate away. "It's not the same," he muttered before leaving. Panic surged in Chi-Chi's chest. If she stopped using the pot, she would lose everything. Her wealth, her reputation, her business, gone in an instant. The pot, as if sensing her resolve weakening, seemed to shimmer under the dim kitchen lights. It was waiting. That night the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever. "You cannot fight me, Chachi. You need me. Give me more." She covered her ears, trembling. Was it too late to turn back? Over the next few weeks, Chi-Chi noticed something chilling. Young customers who had once been regulars had started disappearing. Some had left town, others had simply become shadows of themselves. She overheard a woman crying outside her buka one evening, wailing about how her son had been the brightest in his class, yet now he could barely string a sentence together. Guilt clawed at Chi-Chi's throat. She had done this, she had stolen their futures. One evening Kelechi returned, his face grim. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. They're vanishing one by one, Chi-Chi nodded, eyes brimming with unshed tears. I don't know how to stop it. Kelechi took a deep breath. There's only one way. Chi-Chi's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. The pot is bound to you, Kelechi explained. As long as you continue using it, it will thrive. To stop it, you must perform a ritual, a reversal of the original pact. It will require sacrifice. Chi-Chi's blood ran cold. Sacrifice, she echoed. What kind of sacrifice? Kelechi hesitated. You must give back what the pot has taken. Every ounce of success, every moment of prosperity, it must be returned to those it stole from. Chi-Chi gasped. That would mean losing everything. Her bucker, her fortune, the comfortable life she had built. It would all disappear. She would become nothing. But if I do this, what happens to me? Kelechi's gaze softened. You'll be free, Chi-Chi, free from its grasp. But you must decide quickly. The pot is growing restless. If you delay, it may choose to take something even more precious. A chill ran down her spine. She had been so focused on what the pot had taken from others that she hadn't considered what it might take next. Her own soul, her very essence. Was she willing to risk it? Days passed in agonizing turmoil. Chi-Chi avoided the pot, but its pull was undeniable. Customers grew restless and rumors spread that her food had lost its magic. Sales plummeted. Her once bustling bukker became eerily empty. Kelechi urged her to act, but fear held her captive. Could she truly give it all up? Then one night she awoke to an unnatural stillness. The air was thick with an ominous presence. Slowly she turned to the pot and gasped. The dark clay pulsed as if breathing, and a voice whispered, soft but menacing. You belong to me now, Chi-Chi. Her heart pounded. The decision was no longer hers to delay. If she didn't act now, the pot would take matters into its own hands. With shaking hands, she reached for the instructions Kelechi had given her. The ritual would begin at dawn. One way or another, by sunrise, she would be free, or consumed forever. Chi-Chi spent the night pacing, her fingers trembling as she read over the ritual's instructions. Kelechi sat in the corner, watching her with a mix of concern and urgency. The bukker was eerily quiet, the absence of customers a painful reminder of what she was about to lose. The ritual must be done at dawn, Kelechi reminded her. We need to gather the remaining souls it has taken. Chi-Chi's heart twisted. How could she return something so intangible? The lives stolen, the dreams crushed. Could they really be restored? The pot, as if sensing her doubts, let out a faint hum, its surface pulsing with a dark glow. The choice was closing in. Together she and Kelechi stepped outside. They visited the homes of those who had suffered under the pot's curse. Families of the vanished youths, the once promising students who now wandered lost. Chi-Chi pleaded with them to return to the bukker at sunrise. Some looked at her with fear, others with suspicion, but a few, desperate for answers, agreed. As the night deepened, Chi-Chi could feel the pot's anger. The whispers became more insistent, more desperate. You cannot undo this. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying a presence darker than the night itself. At the first light of dawn, the bukker was filled with uneasy faces, those whose loved ones had suffered the pot's curse. Kelechi stood beside Chi-Chi, a small bowl in his hands containing a mixture of herbs and ash. The pot, now pulsating like a living thing, sat on the fire awaiting its due. Chi-Chi's voice wavered as she recited the incantation from Kelechi's family's old texts. By the bonds of destiny, by the lives undone, I call upon the past to be made whole. The pot's glow flickered violently, a sharp, ear-piercing screech filling the room. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in fear. Then, a gust of hot air burst from the pot, sending utensils clattering to the ground. Chi-Chi's legs buckled as a surge of power rushed through her. One by one, the affected began to cry out. A young man collapsed, his hands gripping his head as his lost memories flooded back. A woman once hopeless and empty clutched her chest as her spirit felt whole again. The air thickened, the weight of countless stolen destinies pressing down on them. But then the pot trembled, and something dark slithered out. A wraith-like figure emerged from the pot, its form shifting between shadow and flame. The crowd screamed as it let out a deafening howl, its rage reverberating through the booker. The pot had never intended to let go of what it had taken. Kelechi stepped forward, chanting, his voice steady despite the chaos. The shadow lunged toward him, its claws extending. Chi-Chi, driven by pure instinct, grabbed a ladle from the counter and swung at the creature. The moment the metal connected, a burst of golden light erupted, making the shadow reel back. "It's weak to purity," Kelechi shouted. "We must force it back." Chi-Chi's mind raced. The pot had bound itself to her through food. If it thrived on corruption, perhaps purity could banish it. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbed the last bowl of food she had made without the pot, and hurled it into the flames beneath the cursed clay. The shadow shrieked as the fire roared higher. The ground shook, cracks forming along the walls. The booker was collapsing under the weight of the battle. The pot cracked, dark energy spilling from it like thick smoke. But it wasn't over yet. Chi-Chi and Kelechi stood firm as the shadow's form wavered, flickering between existence and nothingness. The people in the booker clung to each other, their faces pale with terror. The pot, their captor for so long, was losing its hold. "You cannot win," the shadow hissed. "You belong to me." Chi-Chi stepped forward, gripping the edge of the counter for support. "No," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I was never yours." With the last of her strength, she reached into the fire and flipped the pot, sending it crashing onto the ground. The clay shattered into 1,000 pieces, and a blinding light exploded from within. The shadow let out one final ear-splitting wail before vanishing into the ether. The air fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting instantly. The booker stood eerily still, as if the battle had never happened. Then the people began to stir. The lost ones looked around with clear eyes, no longer trapped in the void of stolen destinies. Tears filled Chi-Chi's eyes. They were free. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Enugu, illuminating a city no longer weighed down by the pot's darkness. Chi-Chi stood in the wreckage of her booker, the smell of soot and burnt wood filling her nostrils. Everything she had built was gone. Yet as she looked around at the people who had regained their futures, she felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Kelechi placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's over." She nodded. It was time to start over, time to rebuild. Not just her business, but herself. No more shortcuts, no more stolen dreams. This time she would create something honest, something real. As the townspeople came forward, offering to help her rebuild, Chi-Chi knew she had made the right choice. She had lost everything material, but she had gained something far greater. She had reclaimed her soul. With the pot destroyed and its darkness vanquished, Chi-Chi found herself standing at the crossroads of a new life. The booker, once a place of thriving business built on stolen destinies, was now in ruins. The people who had once suffered under its influence had regained their lives, but she was left with nothing except a heavy heart and an uncertain future. Kelechi remained by her side, helping her salvage what little she could from the rubble. The townspeople, despite all that had happened, came together to help. "You gave us back our lives," an elderly woman told her, grasping her hands. "Now let us help you rebuild yours." Chi-Chi felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't taking from others, she was receiving kindness freely given. It was a humbling lesson, one she would carry with her as she started over. The days of effortless prosperity were gone. Chi-Chi no longer had the pot's dark magic to attract customers or create irresistible food. Now she had to rely on her own skills, her own sweat, and the goodwill of those around her. It was exhausting, but it was also real. With Kelechi's encouragement, she sought out an old friend of her mother's, a renowned cook who had once run the finest kitchen in the city. If you wish to succeed, the woman told her, you must master your craft, not through shortcuts, but through dedication. Under the woman's strict mentorship, Chi-Chi learned the true art of cooking, how to balance flavors, how to choose the best ingredients, how to pour her heart into every meal. And slowly, her confidence returned. She might have lost the easy path to success, but she had gained something far more valuable: pride in her work. At first, people were hesitant to eat at her new buka. The shadow of the past still lingered, and some feared that the pot's curse might not be fully gone. But Chi-Chi didn't let their doubts shake her. She cooked every meal with care, every dish infused with sincerity and effort. One day, a young man who had once lost his future to the pot stepped into her buka. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he admitted, "but I can see you're trying to change." He took a seat and ordered a plate of jollof rice. When he took his first bite, a slow smile spread across his face. "This," he said, "tastes like redemption." Word spread quickly. Soon more people came, first out of curiosity, then out of appreciation for the authenticity in her cooking. Unlike before, when customers were drawn to her food by dark magic, now they came because they trusted her. And for Chi-Chi, that meant everything. As the buka flourished once more, Chi-Chi found herself drawn to Kelechi in ways she hadn't expected. He had stood by her through everything, guiding her towards redemption even when she doubted herself. Their bond had deepened, built on trust, shared struggles, and an unspoken understanding. One evening, as they sat outside the buka watching the sunset, Kelechi spoke. "You know, I never thought I'd stay in one place for this long," he admitted. "But something about this town, about you, makes me want to." Chi-Chi looked at him, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I never thought I deserved a second chance," she whispered. "Not just at life, but at love." Kelechi smiled, taking her hand in his. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Chi-Chi. Even you." For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe it. A year passed, and Mama Ada's kitchen had become more than just a buka. It had become a symbol of redemption and resilience, where once it had been a place of stolen destinies, now it was a haven of honest work and genuine joy. Chi-Chi stood behind the counter watching as customers, old and new, filled the tables, laughing, sharing stories, enjoying meals cooked with love. She no longer heard whispers in the shadows, no longer felt the weight of guilt dragging her down. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Kelechi, now her partner in both business and life, stepped beside her. "Ready for the lunch rush?" he asked, grinning. She smiled, tying her apron. "More than ready." As she plated the first meal of the day, she realized that she had finally broken free. Not just from the pot's curse, but from the chains of her own past. She had reclaimed her future, one honest step at a time. And this time, she would never take shortcuts again.